holy shit, I like this one. And then you went back to the beginning, you're like, oh man, I fucking love these too. And then as you kind of caught up, you're like, now I don't like it.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
it
mean,
was just trying to figure that out for me.
that's always been my thing. I mean, that's part of why the podcast exists too, is that I've always kind of done that. When I get into a band, now you can't help what the first thing you heard was, you know, but you can help how you go about it after that. So, like for me, you know, some of the first Metallica songs I ever heard were like, you know, the ones that you would hear, like Enter Sandman, King Nothing, you know, songs like that. But then, you know, you go into, but then it's like, okay, but I want to hear what this band sounded like. I want the full context. I want the full picture. And that's what I kind of hope that this podcast provides for people, in a certain sense, that don't necessarily have the time or energy to go in and listen or whatever, to a whole band's discography. Because like when you start getting into bands like Iron Maiden and stuff, that becomes so overwhelming to the point of being like, and then there are tons of bands though where like I actually have gone back to the beginning of the band and their first stuff was really not very good. And like, look at E-Tid. I was turned off by Every Time I Die because their first two records weren't like incredible. But in a case like that, I, you know, had heard some of the stuff off of Hot Damn originally. So I was like, okay. So there is stuff in here that I like. But I like the context of going back to the beginning and seeing where it's at. Like even like August Burns Red, if you go back to their original stuff, it doesn't sound anything like what they would eventually become. Like they had kind of that more like early Every Time I Die, like breakdowny squeals, you know, chunk squee type of sound. That's the technical term for it.
Okay, duly noted.
Yeah, chunk squee. Yeah, it's you want to write that down. Oh yeah, Tortuga. That would have been a great sound effect to just play over and over and over again on the Ailstorm episode. Just the sound of a rum cask just popping. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, Mr. Kool-Aid Man.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh my goodness. But yeah, we are here just chilling out pre-show and doing our sweet thing. What are you drinking tonight, John?
A plethora of things.
Oh,
I have the.
So you're not going to be able to talk in 2 hours. Got it.
I have my Pumpkin Southern Tier whiskey.
The Pumpkin. All hail the Pumpkin.
Yeah, I think Avenged Sevenfold wrote a song about that. And then I just opened the Key Lime Sour Gummy Bear City Builts.
Oh, nice.
So we'll see how that is in just a minute. And then my wife made 2 Orange Crush shots while I went to go to the bathroom.
Very nice.
So
don't talk to Joe about Orange Crush. I
mean, it was his favorite wrestler.
You do, but you know it'll be, you know, a long conversation.
It'll be the longest conversation. Orange Crush is like gold in a bottle.
It's gold in a glass bottle.
It's delicious, and everyone needs to enjoy the glory that is Orange Crush.
They really ought to enjoy.
All right, well, I'm going to do the shot.
Do it. I was going to say get it all out of your system, but what I really meant is go ahead and get it in your system. Get that nice warmth. Feeling good?
Yeah. It's surprising how good this pumpkin whiskey is. Like, I shouldn't be because I love the beer.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this. I'd have to do some research, but I don't know if this is the first thing Southern Tier Distilling has made. So it has me interested if they can do like a Warlock version of this in a whiskey, or if they can do some of the again, get some Chambord, change your life, dude.
It's funny. I'm the only one not drinking tonight.
Huh?
I'm the only one not drinking tonight, but I'm just trying to cut down on the calories and all that stuff. So I've got myself some nice water.
Yep. I drank a bunch of water all day. Actually, I've been drinking a shitload of water for last 2 weeks.
Well, good. So we can look forward to 19 pee breaks.
Well, it's weird. Now that I've been smoking again.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's new.
Dude, that was... No, it's not.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like smoking cigarettes.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, exactly. Not smoking cigarettes. No, when we were out in Vegas, I found they had good pre-rolls for like $10 a pre-roll. So I was actually able to... It was weird, though, because like typically when I smoke, it like kind of puts you in the... kind of mellows you way the fuck out, and then you pass out. And or eat a bunch of food first. But this shit, it was like you'd smoke it, and then you'd get like nice and toasty, but then it'd go away like 25 minutes later, but you had like a pretty solid like head high, so you're just like, all right. And then I would go and eat like pizza slices.
There you go.
$1 at a time.
Dude, I could go for some pizza right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, we were supposed to on New Year's Eve. We were actually supposed to go get pizza. I was in line to get it because they sell slices. And then the next thing I know, our friends are like, "Hey, we're behind that building," and I was like, "Okay." And then they're like, "So why don't you come on over here and have some cocktails, and then we're gonna go get these street tacos over by your house." And I was like, "Okay."
You can buy beer pretty much anywhere in Missouri.
Gas stations included.
I'm answering a question for Chris McCoy.
Why is John drinking and eating on the show?
Yeah.
The Chris McCoy.
The one, the only Chris McCoy.
What lady with a dick did he send you?
Oh, nothing today.
That's like trading cards.
Yeah. Nothing today. I have a very special
Folder?
Chris,
Do you like
Chris folder.
motorboating while headbanging?
There it is. All right. Well, cool. We're all set up. Joe's got the soundboard nice and fired up.
Getting it all out of my system. 'Cause
He can
I
make
can't
me.
really
He
do
can
it
make
while
me
I'm
say
recording.
anything. It's hilarious.
That's true.
It is. Dun, 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 dun. I've got my stuff.
I didn't realize how many people weren't actually playing their parts.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
General Metalcore reporting for duty.
All right. General Death Metal reporting for duty. Will you guys let me know when you'd like to get started? And I will be here to acquiesce that for you.
Acquiesce?
I don't know what that means, but
I don't know what that means either.
I just said it because it sounded like fancy, like real fancy, like yup.
I feel like a fancy man.
I'm gonna go ahead and delete this local recording of us talking about nothing.
Yeah, same.
Yep, I haven't even started.
I know you haven't. That's why I'm going back to the beginning. I'll wait until I hear the dun 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 dun.
That's
There
a
you
good
go.
time.
Good times, great oldies. No, this is good though. This gives people time to get here.
Get comfy. Pull up a
Get
couch.
nice and comfy.
I hope people get here, fairly soon.
And we'll see.
Holy shit. That is fucking delicious. Holy shit.
Which one is that?
That's the key lime gummy bear sour. I'm not even a big sour fan, but holy shit.
You have gummy bears for your hair and for your drink tonight, John?
Yeah.
Hair and drink gummy bears.
I need sex
know you
and
love
be
it.
like, yo, you need to come try this.
Dude, I'm serious. Like, I get it. You can buy Screwball pretty much anywhere now, and it's only $35, but it is either as sweet as it tastes, or it is pretending to be sweet, and that is why it doesn't hit very hard. Because I have had three of these bottles
Fat
this
grabbed
week.
it. My fat grabbed it.
Oh, I've been there, buddy.
At your third hand.
I have been there so many times. Alrighty, let's jump in. Whoa, boy, Chris McCoy's
Fucking
here.
turd.
McCoy drinks beer.
Chris McCoy is here?
Chris McCoy is
Do you
here.
like motorboating while
right up
headbanging?
here in the chat. He can hear his own voice.
That's what I do.
Terrifying.
Frank, you can't.
Yeah, Ty, we are absolutely doing Living Sacrifice tonight, and they are legends, despite what this dude Jon Beatty's going to tell you. Just tell yourself he's wrong and move on. That's what I do.
Oh man, sorry, that beer is so good.
Chris should
Did you go for another one?
Chris should bring me over a case of beer. I have no alcohol in the house.
Chris, don't do it. He's doing really good tonight.
Is he though?
I mean, I talked about Wolverine Blues. I mean, that happened. I mean, as far as you guys are concerned, it happened, last week, but...
WTF.
There we go. So lame. I know how
Getting
it
the
feels.
crowd pumped, man.
Let's get them up.
Get them up.
All right, Chris, just before we get going, so I got this sour beer, and I'm not super big on sour beers. It's a key lime, white gummy bear, or gummy bear, whatever. Doesn't have to be white. Sour. Stupid good. Well, because my wife and I, all of our friends do white gummy bear shots. So I'm used to whenever you say something in spirit form, it's usually white, like white gummy bear or whatever. So I just assumed I'd have it. Man, this beer is so good. I'll have to buy some and send it down to you guys.
He's drinking a 9% IPA from Against the Grain.
This is a 6%, surprisingly, which is kind of quite a bit for a sour.
It is.
And then on standby, I got this ridiculous AF peanut butter and chocolate Russian Imperial Stout, which
That's
is
beautiful.
11.8. And I just found out Founders, it's got one of my favorite beers, and that bitch is like 15%. So I can't wait to go soon and go grab that guy.
There you go.
Way to go, John.
We got this.
That's why I had this.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm not going to show mine on camera, but yeah, I can relate. That's why I'm trying to cut down, honestly, so that I can fit into some of my old shirts. That's the goal for 2021. Fit into your old shirts.
What about old pants?
Yeah, old pants. Not that old of pants.
I mean, can we dig out the Hot Topic pants with the fucking buckles on the ass?
We cannot. Absolutely not.
The gigantic fucking pants. Come on. The ones that fit the Dreamcast in the front pocket.
What, you mean your Sony Walkman?
Yeah.
Your
Pretty
Sega
much.
Walkman?
No, the Sega Dreamcast, baby.
It was
Dude, that
only
had
a Walkman when Dan carried it.
That was my favorite system for NFL game. That NFL game for 2K was so fucking good on that
Nice.
game. Randy Moss, Dante Culpepper.
Ooh, what am I going to do with my channel points tonight?
Channel
I mean,
them.
You can use your channel points, but channel points, I'm not going to actually do anything unless we're on a dedicated Twitch break. I need to say something about that on the main page.
Dude, you are so official when you talk about that. You gave it a name. It was great. You're like, when I observe the dedicated Twitch break.
That is the dedicated Twitch break. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, see?
What we will say is the thing that we will say. Well, my Nightbot is supposed to be dropping stuff in, but I don't see that, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Nightbot is currently active, so we'll see what he says when he decides to say it.
That's cool. That's cool. You guys ready to jump in? Oh, Joe's already recording, so I guess I should be too.
I am.
I'm looking for a fun intro. If anybody's got a suggestion of something funny I can say to open the show, let me know.
I think that was it.
Oh, Buddy's here. He's gonna hold it up. He's a mod. Not anymore. I'm taking it away. Nightbot's gonna do everything for me, supposedly. Not, dude. I logged into Nightbot the other day, and I was like, I don't know how to use this at all. So I'm gonna set some things up and see what happens. Okay, no, get that out of here, dude. That scared the crap out of me. I thought it was coming from beyond my headphones or beyond the grave.
Beyond the headphones.
Yes, beyond the grave headphones. It is a grave situation.
How many times can you say grave?
Oh, as many times as I want, man.
Grave digger.
From the grave. Grave digger, will you dig my grave? Yeah, I sang Dave Matthews. That's the only Dave Matthews song I like.
We forgive you.
Yeah, it's fine. All right. Let's do it.
Oh, Dan wants to get going right now.
I do. I want to talk about the sacrifice. We're 16 minutes after, man. People are all like, "Puh, talked about nothing. Unsubbed. Expand." I know you guys hate the Bruce Fitzhugh era of Living Sacrifice. Yep. He'll leave us a 1-star review.
You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 204, Living Sacrifice Revisited. Hosted by Dan Terry, Jon Beatty, and Joseph Wren. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think the hammering process is what happens when Dan plays blood and finds the sledgehammer, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is John. You wanted to talk about Living Sacrifice again.
I did, man. We talked about Zao again a few weeks ago. We did it live here on Twitch, and it was a lot of fun. So, this is exciting for me because I love talking about this band. I think one of the most frustrating aspects of doing this show for me is whenever we listen to something that I genuinely love, like not just like something I'm checking out for the first time or something that was suggested for us to talk about. Not that I don't love those bands. I find a lot of really good bands in doing that. So keep those suggestions coming. But for me, a band like Living Sacrifice or Zao or Norma Jean or Really Dying, like bands like that that I actually really enjoy listening to their music. And then it's like, no, we did that. And then as time goes on, it's like, no, we talked about Living Sacrifice 2 years ago, and I'm like, but I want to do it again because it was so much fun. And I whined and I cried and I got my way, as is often the case. So here we are, talking about Living Sacrifice, except I think this is going to be interesting because last time, we didn't have John. And John, you guys are going to be hearing and seeing a lot more of John because he is going to be filling in the empty seat of the third co-host. And I couldn't think of anybody better to kind of challenge some of the opinions, some of the hot takes that pop up from here and there. Let's try that again. Some of the hot takes that happen from time to time on this show.
Yeah, as you're gonna be introduced on this episode and the one we're doing next, spoilers, and Joe will probably bleep it out so you don't know, but with Entombed, I'd never listened to these bands, and chances are, looking at the master list of what we're probably gonna do most of this year, that's gonna be the case. So you're either going to really enjoy my hot takes on bands I've never listened to and will be talking about for the first time, or you're going to grow to fucking hate me. And that's fine. I have broad shoulders. So
grow to hate you?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, our love-hate relationship is my favorite part of our relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you think you're always right, and you're not, and that's okay.
Welcome to my world.
Well, I also don't agree with you either.
Buddy
Normally,
says the
Dan gets all the credit.
It's going to be great.
As he gave me a Corey Taylor mask, I love it. Am I the untainted one?
Here's the tortilla man.
I don't need nothing.
I guess let's get into Living Sacrifice. That's why everyone's here, right?
That is why we're here. Yeah, we are here to talk about the one, the only, the often imitated, never replicated Living Sacrifice.
Oh, they duplicate and replicate very well.
I mean, they don't replicate. Actually, that's not true. They do replicate. There's like how many bands that are loosely related to Living Sacrifice in some way, shape, or form?
Dude, I think that's the hardcore scene, metalcore scene as a whole from back then and then some. I mean, shit, even the 80s thrash scene kind of does that.
We call that the 6 degrees of Rocky Gray.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Rocky Gray's been in like all the bands. Evanescence, Project 86, Thy Pain, Soul Embraced. other bands that I don't remember the names of.
Is that the
dude's
official
got-
tab on the Wikipedia of him? Is just other bands?
I should have done that, but I didn't think about it.
Fair enough.
I think it would. I think it would be too big of a labor of somebody to make the Wikipedia page on Rocky Gray, as the guy is just in so many bands and is always doing something. It
He
sounds
plays
like
all the guitars, all the drums.
does
He
some
shows
vocals.
up on your favorite new album by an artist that crowd funds and decides to put out a new album. Rocky Gray is basically the man when it comes to this scene.
I just wish he wasn't so neutral and would just choose either black or white.
It don't matter.
Well, there's actually 14 Shades of Gray, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. We've labeled all 14 of them.
And 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the 12 Days of Christmas.
Yeah, I'm running out.
I mean, you got 11, Dan. That's your.
I think
that's your
there was a
number now.
band. I think there was a band once called.
Finger 11?
I think there was a band called 11 Hours Down. I think there's that. I don't think Rocky
10
Gray was in
Things
the
I
band.
Hate About You.
And then there's 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
What do we got for 9?
No, I don't know.
Well, before Dan
gotta be
allows
fixed.
this charade to go on, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, twitch.tv/DiscussMetalDan for all your game streaming and live show recording needs. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
What else can I say about 5-star reviews that I haven't said before? I like reading them. They make me happy. 1-star reviews, they make me a little bit sad. So leave us whatever kind of review that matches up with whatever kind of mood you want me to be in, and we will accept that review, and we will read it on the show. Unless you don't write anything, got to write something, right? I mean, if you feel strongly enough to click on a certain number of stars, then there should be something backing up that feeling. So let us know.
How many stars would you like them to click on, Dan?
Well, I mean, I would prefer them to click on 5 stars, but I can't control what people do, so it is what it is. But we seriously, though, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys that share the episodes. We appreciate you guys that show up and watch us record the episodes live. Like, that's been incredible. That's been a lot of fun. And so, in the spirit of that, I just want to thank all of you from is it the top or the bottom of my heart that's the good one? I think it's the bottom. And then the love just rises to the surface.
Well, there's only one place to go from there.
This is an upside-down situation like Stranger Things, so technically it's going to be the dark inside of the heart that's going to be the most positive. That was the point of that show, right?
How about all of my heart? All of my
I've
heart
only
is
been
what
watching
I want.
Cobra Kai. Sorry.
All of
I
my
like
heart.
that.
Yes, Cobra Kai is awesome. Check
That
it
new
out.
season.
I see 5 names, Dan. Go ahead and say hello to everybody here on Twitch Live.
Oh man, well, I don't see 5 names, so can you just throw that out there for me? I can't see that. Sorry.
Looks like we've got the Doomhammer in-house. Buddy is here. I see Go Within.
Go with him.
Go with him.
That's right.
I can't read. I'm blind. It's a thing. Chris McCory is here as well.
Chris McCory.
It's definitely Chris McCoy, but I see an R, and that's the funny part.
Yeah, that's with the drinks, because
And
apparently
also-
that's what you've been doing, and that's why you added an R.
Hey, Ty McMunn's here too.
That's right, he is.
What's up, everybody?
What's up, everybody?
Yep. Welcome to another
Thank you for
episode
coming to
of
my
the
podcast recording.
Discography Discussion podcast.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get drunk and ruin all your favorite bands.
Do it. I mean, that's what I've been doing since 2017.
So,
Hey, you
Dan,
know what? Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody. So, Dan, tell me about Living Sacrifice.
Oh my God, guys. Living Sacrifice is a metal band that started in the late 80s. Let's just say 90s, because it's not really. I mean, I think they put a demo out in 89, maybe. Not Yielding to Ungodly. I think that's what it was called. I know that's what it was called. I just said I think to make myself sound cooler. I'm a huge fan of this band. They've gone through so many different styles since they formed that it's really kind of hard to keep track. I mean, what do we call them? Do we call them a thrash band? Do we call them a death metal band? Do we call them a metalcore band? Do we call them a groove metal band? They've been all of those things.
I would like to call them a thrash band just out of principle.
Not surprised. Living Sacrifice being an interesting case in that they were a Christian metal band in the 90s, which is rough if you're a Christian metal band in the 90s playing extreme metal. It's not like it was in like 2005 where like you actually got on more shows if you were a Christian metal band. This was a totally different era, and it's very interesting to see a band talking about Christianity basically becoming a pillar of an entire scene. So, I mean, in that scene, these guys they're kind of the band that you look at when you think about Christian metal and hardcore and all of that stuff. People are always like, yeah, man, bands like Zao and Living Sacrifice and Embodiment. Like, I mean, if there's a big four of Christian metal, Living Sacrifice is in one of those slots, if not two.
They're definitely one of the bands that come up first when you start listening to heavier music in your youth, and you're friends with a guy named Dan who was almost fully restricted to non-secular music because it was evil. Don't ask me about what that Bleach album really is. He might tell that story later on. But Living Sacrifice takes that sound that you're putting up with because you want it to be okay. You kind of want to believe that your music is as cool as the stuff that's on the radio all the time. But Living Sacrifice, for the most part at least, they definitely are. And they are legendary. Not just in that scene, but in metal in general. I see a lot of bands call out Living Sacrifice as a prime influence when it comes to heavy guitars and riffs and extreme vocals and melody, because they have that too.
They definitely have a very interesting relationship with melodic interludes and passages, and we even get some melodic choruses out of them, which is something that you would think that I would hate, but I actually find them to be sparse enough to be acceptable. This is not they don't go full Demon Hunter, because never go full Demon Hunter.
I legit thought you were going to say they had a special relationship with God.
They do have a special relationship with God. That's the 100% true statement. John, what's your history with Living Sacrifice?
None, just like my relationship with God.
Very good, very good. So, in your relationship with Entombed, right?
Yep. Basically, at this point, just assume that I've not listened to anything we're going to talk about until about, what, April?
Yeah.
I'm a virgin. Interesting year, guys.
I'm going to be a virgin until about April. I think I've mapped out.
I mean, that sounds about right.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm giving so much of my audio virginity to you guys.
Well, we definitely appreciate you. We definitely appreciate having you here, John. So, yeah, I mean, Living Sacrifice is the band that you want to check out if you're not sure, like, what this Christian music thing's all about. And you've heard that there's heavy Christian bands, but you don't really know who to check out. Definitely check out Zao, but also make sure to check out Living Sacrifice. So let's get into it, boys.
1991. Living. Dan, you want to finish this for me?
Sacrifice. It's weird though that it's called Living Sacrifice because it's Slayer, right? it straight up is Slayer. So this first Living Sacrifice record is very interesting to me because I feel like as a new band, and these guys were probably in their teens, late teens, whenever they recorded this. The biggest thing that you could do, especially in Christian music, was to sound like Believer, or Tourniquet, or some of those other bands. The Christian thrash scene that existed prior to Living Sacrifice, the thrash scene that existed before Living Sacrifice was more in almost the style of the more extreme 80s bands. So I mean, you had heavier bands, heavier vocals, in all of that. Vengeance Rising was really important at the time for having those extreme vocals. Mortification was actually awesome back then, for being this like brutal, death metal band. But like those bands, I hate to say it, they did come across as a lot more original, with the exception of Deliverance, who was basically just Metallica. But most of those bands had a very, 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 very original sound, whereas Living Sacrifice came out of the gate with not being as original. But they are notable for being one of the only Christian bands that I can think of that actually sounded like Slayer and really tried to move that sound a little bit forward, and especially in Christian music. So, I mean, in that regard, the actual music contained on it is actually pretty good for thrash metal Slayer sounding stuff. Like, it's a clone. We've gotten that out of the way, but I think that the vocals are good for the time. I think that the lead guitar work is good for the time. I mean, this is fast-paced, breakneck speed stuff. We're not really in blast territory just yet, but we are going to get there eventually with the next record. Overall, though, the only complaint I really have about this record is that the solo work is it's a little bit Slayer. It's a little cat strangly. For lack of a better term, they hadn't really, I think, completely mastered the art of writing a good solo. is a nice way to put it. I don't think that I don't think it's bad. It's better than I can play, but those are not the type of solos that I really enjoy hearing as a music listener. I like something that kind of grooves with the actual riffs. But that's also kind of a nitpick, considering the fact that most of these bands that were playing this Slayer style of thrash metal, I mean, that's what you played. You played Cat Strangler solos. You're literally following your influence. So to say that it's not good because it's not my preference is doing it a bit of a disservice.
It definitely checks the box. And most likely this is just the band getting together for the first time and writing a record that was supposed to be as heavy and intense and as fast-paced as possible. So Slayer.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm expecting when I'm listening to Living Sacrifice. I think they very quickly will change their sound to what they are conventionally known for. But it's not a bad first album. If anything, it sounds thin. Sounds like if I had the cassette, I would really enjoy listening to this on my Walkman portable cassette player or my car. In my case, from the passenger seat of Dan's car, because Dan always drives back in the day.
Well, if you need a cassette tape, Joe, I have one. I've got several copies of the Living Sacrifice self-titled on cassette. So, yeah.
Just bring that down next time, dude.
Sounds good to me, man. Yeah, I think that this record is incredible for its significance in Christian thrash metal. I think that this obviously, like, you go to Cornerstone Festival, right? And it's a whole bunch of it's like this mix of like 80s hair bands and like because Christian music historically at the time had been more or less a couple of years behind. So like what would have been cool in 98 really probably wasn't as cool in typically wasn't as cool anymore. You know, so like 89, 88, 89, but you could go to Cornerstone and see bands that would be playing what was popular a couple of years prior, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So to see a band at Cornerstone that was playing something this heavy and this extreme, that sounded like Slayer, like aces across the board, especially in the U.S.
Are we ready for non-existent?
Oh, I knew we were going to have to talk about this record.
You asked for it.
Oh, boy.
1992.
So yeah, this is a thing they did.
The vocals on this album are not very good.
Nothing on this record is good.
Nah.
Let's be real. I don't know. I mean, you didn't. Whatever. You just steamrolled past my thoughts on the last record, which is fine. All I had to say is really it just sounds like a thrash metal album of this era. But I don't know what the fuck happened to this record from a producing standpoint. But holy shit, is this bad? It's weird though, because you sometimes get glimpses into what the songs could have been with better production and all of that. Like, you know, Chemical Straitjacket, I think could have been a really great song, but unfortunately the production on it and just how it was recorded is terrible. There's even like, you know, that really solid part at the end of Void of Expression, and it's really fucking good. But the unfortunate thing is it's done no favors when that dog shit solo comes in, and you're just like it's almost like someone was like, you know, I had a guitar in my hand, and then someone's like, "Hey, we're punching you in for the solo," and you're like, "Wait, oh, shit," and you just whatever the fuck came out, and that was what ended up on the record. Like someone surprised you, like you had a guitar in your hand, they're like, "Hey, solo for whatever," you're like, "Solo? Oh, all right. What song was that? Doesn't matter. It's going in. You're fine." I know obviously everyone's going to say something about the vocals. Obviously they're not great. But with this being the first time I've really listened to the band, it does kind of I did kind of have to remind myself, you know, a few times of this is the era of all those great Florida death metal bands and so forth. And, you know, them maybe trying to want to incorporate what they're doing, because, you know, something that Dan and I have talked about, and Dan and I obviously, and I think like a lot of people, grew up completely different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So for me, like I got to listen to everything, good, bad, or indifferent. Don't know how you feel about it, but it's interesting to me when you hear bands like this, and for someone like Dan, who is, you know, in a very predominant Christian household and probably has to buy his records at the what were the Christian bookstore? Is that what they were called? I think.
Yes.
Like you have to, you're buying your records there, and potentially this has been deemed acceptable by them to be in the store. There's no cursing, So you're basically trying to find your quote unquote Christian equivalent to whatever the mainstream is listening to. And so what's interesting is trying to think about this band for that demographic, because it's definitely not what how I grew up. Like I grew up listening not necessarily to a ton of Slayer, but those thrash bands, you know, your Anthraxes and so forth, your Big Four. And so to me, when I hear this, I go, it's like they're trying to sound like these bands and just not quite hitting what makes those bands great or made them great so early on. But I feel like you can see the potential for them to grow and become that band within this genre, like this Christian thrash genre. Could be completely wrong and off base with that, but that's kind of how I felt when listening to Non-Existent. Is it feels like a band who's trying to find their way within this thrashing and how it's kind of growing, especially with all the influences that they can pull from. But it's still at this point to me feels like a band that's trying to emulate, not to originate.
Yeah, and I think that like Non-Existent, I've had such a weird relationship with, because I didn't hear it first. You know, the album that got me into Living Sacrifice was The Hammering Process, which obviously is a hard act to follow. But as I've said in other podcasts, I heard Hammering Process, and then of course there's the urge to want everything, right? So by the time I by the time I'd obtained everything, I had no idea what I was really in for. I knew that the first record was going to sound old, and it did, at the time, because this is like, early 2000s that I'm hearing it. I'm like, it's a record from 1990, and it for the most part, it sounded to me more like par for the course. But Non-Existent was weird because they went for a totally different atmosphere. You've got this cover artwork, which is just kind of scary, at least for the time. It's just full of skulls and there's like a not superimposed, but like a image of the band that's like a high contrast, like black and white. A lot of bands used that effect on their photos in the 90s. And so what they're trying to show you is just straight brutality. We don't want there to be any question with anybody about what kind of band this is. This is death metal. We're gonna just be the legit thing. And I know from people that I've spoken with that record pissed off so many parents of in Christian households and pissed off a whole bunch of people that were it pissed off a whole bunch of people that were really not they just felt like Christian bands were not supposed to cross a certain line, and they felt like they had crossed a line with this. So the record becomes badass just by association, in the sense that it's a little bit more edgy. It's like the modern equivalent of if a Christian band says fuck on a record. People are like, oh, you've crossed that line. Now you're no longer. Well, they defined the great line and then they crossed it, right? But like.
If
at the time,
playing field was level, we're not talking about secular band versus non-secular band. Would this version of Living Sacrifice have been signed to a label and gone on tour with other metal bands? Or would they be another underground band that really just wanted to be part of that scene?
I think that they were more of a they had a little bit of credibility as far as because I know that they did tours with Malevolent Creation and some of the bigger death metal bands. I know that once they started playing death metal, that it kind of opened up a lot of doors for them as far as getting more credibility in the scene. I mean, I think mostly they were probably still doing Christian tours, but it is absolutely incredible how far they got in this earlier incarnation, because at the time the music wasn't super original, and I feel like people would have had issues with the Christian lyrics and all that. My understanding though is that the fans that's how the fans acted, but the actual other bands that were Satanists or whatever were super super cool to them, and were yeah, we're all just out here making metal. There was a story that DJ told on the As the Story Grows podcast about how the dudes from Malevolent Creation were basically telling people if you mess with these guys, you're messing with us, and all this stuff. But back on the album itself, it's badass because of the cover artwork. It's going to upset people, Christian people, and it's also badass enough to look like just a regular metal record, that wouldn't necessarily be in the Christian section of a bookstore and or a music store. See, for me, I grew up Christian, so a lot of, it's always the bookstore where you buy music, not the music store.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't buy it at a gas station.
Well, if they would have been available at a gas station, I would have bought it for sure. But so you put this thing on, right, and you've got this creepy intro that was made by the dude from Circle of Dust, who later went on to become Cell Dweller. But so he does this this creepy intro, and it's got monks chanting, and it really does create a very dark atmosphere. But man, then when the music starts, it almost completely takes me out of it because of just how badly recorded it is. It doesn't, like, it sounds thin. Like the first Living Sacrifice album sounds better than Non-Existent. You know, it sounds beefier. It sounds harder. This record sounds like it was recorded by somebody that did not know how to record heavy music. And that's actually true. You can ask anybody in the band and they will tell you 100% that, yeah, this guy had no idea what he was doing, and that they had to kind of step in and do a whole bunch of stuff. So
It's not-
there's that.
It's not for the incomplete bad sounding, but it is absolutely not as clear as the previous album. Sounds like a tragedy of circumstance. The guy that they hired to record the record didn't know how to record what Living Sacrifice was playing at that time, and this is what we got. It really does come down to the engineer, especially back then. I think it's interesting, though, looking back on the 90s and looking back on this time frame of Christian music and Christian metal, I'm with John. I listened to everything because everything is cool. If it sounds good, listen to it. But this is the time prior to the internet and prior to the current generation of parents, where you relied on that establishment to tell you that the music was okay to listen to. You relied on the sanctuary of those establishments. So you go to the Christian bookstore because you as a parent are expecting them to vet the products for you. It's similar to the argument in the 80s about the parental advisory and the PMRC and all of that stuff, just taken to a different place. People that don't have time to listen to every second of these albums just want somebody else to do the work for them.
Basically,
it's interesting to me that the cover of this album is what set everybody off. I would be listening to the content and be more disturbed by the sound of the music than I am by what the cover looks like.
Honestly, you're right on, though. Like, that people relied on the establishment to do the, like, okay, if this is sold in this store and it's on this label, then it's okay for kids to listen to. You know, and that's really annoying. It's something we've talked about in a lot of interviews with Discuss Metal, you know, bands getting pigeonholed into a certain genre that maybe they didn't necessarily know they were being pigeonholed into. But I think Living Sacrifice, it was one of those things where it was always a safe bet with Living Sacrifice because these guys were Christians. They were in it. They were in it to be, you know, a Christian band that people respected and liked, but they also wanted to be very metal, and they also wanted to have some level of legitimacy to their metal. But I'm sorry I keep going off topic about the record because there's just so much about Non-Existent as to why people like it as much as they do, and I think what it really boils down to is that even though what's on the record is not really that great as far as the band goes, like, they're gonna outdo this record immediately. You know, it's gonna become Non-Existent. It's gonna get shoved under a shelf whenever you start hearing some of their other records. Vocals are really not very good. I know DJ was trying to do a different thing. You know, obviously he couldn't do the same vocals that he did on the self-titled over this, like, death metal record. It had to be deep. It had to be, you know, and I always say that maybe he was just trying to do an Obituary thing, which in my opinion is a terrible place to start because the vocals of Obituary is terrible. But it is one of those, yeah, you can check out the Obituary episode if you want to hear more about that. But I do think that this band it didn't really matter what the music sounded like on Non-Existent. I think that they had made a big enough impression on all of those people that they're like, yeah, check out this crazy death metal band. And I would imagine that a lot of Christians at the time probably hadn't heard death metal unless they were already in the know. You know? So, like, the average parent hears Non-Existent, they're like, oh, God, what is this? This is, whatever. And some Christians were hearing death metal for the first time from bands like Living Sacrifice and Mortification. So they didn't really have a whole lot to compare it to. So I think that's why a lot of the times people are like, oh no, the vocals on Non-Existent are sick, or the solos are sick. It's all, whatever. But I would say for me, the only enjoyment that I really get out of listening to Non-Existent is I do enjoy those melodic passages that are interspersed throughout the record. I think that adds a lot to the dark atmosphere. And sometimes they even sound a little bit hopeful. So, I mean, in that regard, it does give this, like, light in a dark place. And I think that was the goal. Like, 100% was the goal.
John, do you got more on this, or are we ready? Are we ready for Inhabit?
Yeah,
I
let's
don't
go to
think
Inhabit.
anyone's ready for Inhabit.
1994. Inhabit.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I pick John.
So we can all agree that last record was just dog shit for so many reasons.
I was a lot nicer on it than I was on the first Living Sacrifice episode. We like really dug into it, but I have since we did that episode, I've spoken to DJ a number of times, and we kind of talked about some of that stuff, and so I have a lot more context than I did going in, whereas originally it was just like, oh, I don't know, like, why would someone do this? Like, this had to pass a panel of people that, all gave it a thumbs up and said it was good in order for it to get released.
I mean, sometimes with some of those stories, you have to wonder how much of it is accurate or how much of it has been changed by time and the reaction to quote unquote the music or whatever, and someone being like, well, actually I really didn't like this when we were doing it, but the rest of the guys or the label or whatever, it's easier to kind of do that shit in hindsight. Who knows how someone actually felt in real time. I mean, Dan, you told me a story in Messenger when we were talking about this, because I was like, what the fuck happened? And you were like, oh, this and this, and I was like, if it was more of like, oh, we just didn't want to like work with this dude, or we thought if we put out a shitty record that let us put go back and do it again and put out a better one.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, a label will never fucking do that. Like, I feel like a label will be like, oh, you're gonna do that and waste our fucking money? No, we're putting this out now, it looks bad on you. Like, don't ever try to fuck a label. I think we've all learned that through everything.
That is how you get a yeehaw, giddy up, Satan situation.
Sure. But talking more specifically about Inhabit, this is more back to kind of the style of production that makes sense, I think, for this band, this style of band. But we have a slightly more cleaned up attempt on the vocals than we did, obviously, the last one.
For sure, yeah.
Something that caught me off guard, and I just kind of had to be like, question marks, was that an explosion in the middle of the song before the first verse?
Oh, yeah.
In the shadow.
Yes,
like,
it was
why?
an explosion. They added a bunch of stuff like that. There's a lot of like sample enhancements that go on in Inhabit.
I mean, I know that was big in the hardcore scene back then. Like, obviously, like, you look at 18 Visions with like the samples they fucking used, and every hardcore band back then. But like, it was just like it was like someone almost got like, and this is a really nerdy reference, if anyone watched Friends with Ross with his fucking little keyboard thing, and he's just playing all these like sound effects to make a quote unquote song, I was like, it's almost like that. Like, they got a patch of sound effects and someone was just like, and you're like, why? Cause that's why.
So it's Joe with his soundboard.
Sure. I think what's interesting is, as a whole, this record threw me a lot more curveballs from the production. That weird murder yell panned hard left on Not Beneath was kind of interesting. The double time parts toward the end of Inhabit kind of made me go back and replay those parts because I thought they were really cool. There was just more on this record for me to kind of grab onto as a listener, as a fan of this style of music more, and from, like I said, a production. Because I think for me, something that constantly brings me back is a good songwriting, but also good production tricks. Where like maybe there's something about a record where you listen to it and you focus on, maybe it's the lyrics or the vocals, and the second time you go through, it's I'm paying more attention to the music, and then they're doing different stuff from a production standpoint that kind of keeps bringing you back, where you're able to find new things. And I think this is one of the first records from this band where it kind of fires on all cylinders, where the mix is good, the production's good, the songwriting's a lot better, and just everything is working together to create a more cohesive, fuller picture of what Living Sacrifice is and is going to be, or can be.
Yeah, totally. And Inhabit is a huge improvement for me as far as from Non-Existent, because Non-Existent was just not a great record, but I think one of the biggest things about Inhabit is that they're no longer ripping off of anyone.
No.
This is where they actually took the good elements that were present in Non-Existent and did it better. They did a better job of it. The drumming is absolutely out of this world, insanely better than anything that they'd ever done before. Lance Garvin is insane on this record, just completely on fire. And it's one of those things where it's almost unbelievable how good it actually is. And then you've got the riffs. The riffs are heavier. This record actually has a punch. The guitars have beef. Like it's the real deal. Finally, like after waiting a little bit, for them to kind of figure it out, they absolutely figure it out. And they blow it out of the water. There's much more attention paid to the vocals, the delivery. I have to admit, I do think that sometimes the vocals are a little too monotone on this record, but I'll take it over Non-Existent any day. I'll take it, and so in that sense, it's like, yeah. And, again, death metal vocals don't have to be good. They have to be there, but they don't have to be good. But they also can't be horrible. It's such a double standard, It's an unpleasable metal fan sort of situation where it's like, I want the vocals to be good and super, brutal and in your face, but at the same time, I also don't really, if they're super, super bad or whatever, I'm going to yell about it. Like, there's
Ladies
nothing
and
you can
gentlemen,
do right.
unpleasable metal fan.
Yeah, I mean, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, But I think that
You're
even
damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Even if you look at even if you look at DJ's delivery from the self-titled and Non-Existent and Inhabit, he's trying a lot harder to make some of this stuff make sense, and there is a lot of production. There's a lot of production help in all of that. There's definitely a little bit of an effect on his voice that enhances it quite a bit, and plus that part on Not Beneath that you were talking about, I love that. I love that they added that in there. Is it unnecessary? Absolutely, but they didn't have to make an album either. If we're gonna fall, if we're gonna fall into that logic, I think that it was totally cool, totally necessary, and enhances the song. That's one of my favorite Living Sacrifice songs ever. Is Not Beneath. I think that Inhabit is the pinnacle of this first iteration of Living Sacrifice. Where they figured it out. And it would have been interesting, honestly, to hear if they had stuck in this direction where they'd be at now. And my guess is that they would be like a technical death metal band, like a Cryptopsy or something along those lines.
You don't think they'd be Non-Existent if they followed down this route?
I don't think they'd be Non-Existent, no.
Oh, okay.
And I heard what you said. I just chose to not laugh.
I got the cheap pop from Joe.
There you go. Well, that's all that really matters then.
Cheap pops for days. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be your first dedicated Twitch break.
That's right.
Because I can tell Dan is out of breath and needs time to exhale and inhale.
That's right. Inhale, exhale. You know you love it. Oh, man. Yeah, we were taking that Twitch break. We were checking out what everybody's got going on.
Come on, Dan. Go back through these comments. There's some good stuff in there.
I want to go through. I want to. Excuse me, man. I need to get some water. Is what I need to do.
Yeah, you do.
So something that I'm looking back in is Loser Violin says, well, hold on, back up. What about how Reject was on the God Money soundtrack? Yeah, like that I think that was in response to what we were talking about were they like considered credible with secular bands. Yeah, I mean they got on some different compilations and toured with some bigger bands and stuff like that. So like, I mean, in that sense, it was fantastic. And they definitely had that credibility that they needed to kind of get to where they're at now. At some point during the chat, my Nightbot banned Brandon, which can't say I'm too upset about.
Did it ban Brandon? I saw him put him on a timeout.
It put him on a timeout, and then it banned him, and then I unbanned him, and then I banned Nightbot because clearly that thing's become self-aware and is trying to take control. So definitely not feeling it in that regard, even a little bit. So yeah, it's one of those situations. So I'll have to disassemble the Nightbot and figure out why it's become self-aware. And what we can do.
Do not disassemble Johnny number 5.
But then it's just a whole bunch of jizz jokes, and there it is. The churchy, screamy bands. My favorite comment of the night so far was definitely Thai OG metalcore legends, especially for us Christcore bad boys. I love it. But all right, I'm gonna actually take my Twitch break, and by Twitch break I mean fill up my water break. So be entertained by these two gentlemen that are here in front of you at this exact moment.
All right, who
hello internet?
Did
it's
you
Joe and John?
Did you cry during the Brody Lee AEW?
I didn't cry, but I'm extremely upset.
I think the thing that was like hard for me was 10 is a dude I know, like he is from here in Michigan.
Yeah.
And so when Brody's wife was out in the ring with -1, aka Brody Jr. basically, his kid, I lost it when basically Cody, not Cody Rhodes, Cody the 10, when Cody was basically crying under his mask and then was holding Brody's wife. I was like, fuck. That got me. All the tributes while people were like wrestling and shit and like doing like some of his moves, like that got me. It was
every time something happens to basically every time WWE starts to lose some of their ratings and then they go to get that back and actually let the wrestlers wrestle.
Oh, you mean like AEW?
Yes, they do that every few years when they start to lose their shit. Eventually, they go right back to the same old shit. And by same old shit, I mean Hulk Hogan in the 80s. Two guys stand in front, one hit other hit guy slam, guy kick out, guy get pinned. It's not wrestling, it's what Vince wants. It's sports entertainment. So, whenever that happens, it takes a couple more years for like actual good wrestlers to show up and actually start doing wrestling, not just moves, but psychology and performance. He was one of the first ones that came back, or one of the first ones I noticed when they were in a huge rut, because he came in with Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family, and here was this guy that was just wrestling. He wasn't trying to be flippy. He was just wrestling.
No, he's a classic big man.
He was awesome. So yes, I'm really, really, really upset about it.
Yeah, that was rough. I had texted Cody like the night before on Tuesday, and I was like, actually a couple nights before, because I was still in Vegas, and I had like written the text to him like a handful of times where I'm like, I have written and deleted this text to you like probably 5 or 6 times because I know nothing I say nothing in this text is going to make you feel better after you lose somebody, like especially in all the people I've lost this past year. Mm-hmm. But I was like, but I kept reminding myself that when people would reach out, it would make me feel like I wasn't going through something alone. Um, I was like, so at the very least, I hope like this text maybe will be that for you. Um, I don't know. It's really weird. It's between Cody, between Nathan Mowry, that Kind Punk that does the filming for Good Company. This was one where it's like it was really a lot closer. Like I wasn't too far removed from people who were directly impacted by this loss, this death. And I think the thing that makes it really more sad is just the fact that, by all accounts, everyone who talked about him was like, he was such a family person.
Yep.
So to see him basically leave behind the thing that he was sacrificing his time for, really kind of made it all that much harder to me. But now that Dan's back, we don't have to be sad bastards about wrestling.
Oh my God, guys! Yeah, I came back into something that I was not ready for. I feel like I need to cry, but there's no reason to cry because of what we're about to go talk about.
I mean, if you listen to Non-Existent, there's a reason to cry.
Oh my!
All right, we're getting back into this. You guys ready?
And plug me back in.
1997, Reborn.
Oh my God! No, really,
gentlemen, Living Sacrifice has arrived.
This is the Living Sacrifice that most people will say is the album that got them into Living Sacrifice. There's no denying the influence that Reborn has and continues to still have. I mean, much like the Zao reissues that happened, Living Sacrifice, they had a limited reissue of Reborn on vinyl. That thing sold out like it was made out of hotcakes. It just disappeared. Like, you just can't get one. Don't try to get one. You can't get one. You can get one, but you have to pay a lot of money for it. Reborn, you have DJ has exited the band, who was basically, you're not just losing a vocalist in that, but you're losing a band leader. DJ was the band. I mean, as far as he was your typical front man in the sense that he kind of got the shows. You joint manage the band / sing for the band / play bass for the band. So you're losing that in DJ's departure. No pun intended.
So he's a Jason Wisdom.
Kind of like a Jason Wisdom, yes. Vocalist, bass player. Steve Rowe from Mortification, vocalist, bass player. It's just something about those guys. But, so you lose DJ, and the band goes through kind of this weird period of, like, what are we going to do? Because now you've got to find a new bass player, which they do. And they find a new bass player, but then it's like, who's going to do vocals? And I think the hard decision there is, do we find somebody new, or do we promote from within? Evidently, they promoted from within, whereas Bruce Fitzhugh, who played guitar for the band on all of the records that we just talked about, decided to, from what I understand, was a little bit pressured into it, step up to the microphone. And, I think it would have been really easy to try to just do what DJ did to keep some consistency. But what they did, what you gained with Bruce was a hardcore scream, a hardcore influence that was desperately needed for a band in 1997. He made the band sound infinitely more modern than they would have sounded necessarily on a band on a record like Inhabit. I mean, it's not that Inhabit sounds dated, but it was kind of the older style of metal, the pre-metalcore, And in 1997, it's not like metalcore was really an established genre. You had a few bands doing it, like Converge, But for the most part, metalcore, especially in Christian music, pretty much unheard of. Even at this time, Zao was still playing kind of what they called like the spirit-filled hardcore. There was kind of a proto-metalcore sort of sound. They were playing metal riffs, but they had a guy screaming over it. So Living Sacrifice was like, okay, well, we're going to continue being the metal band that we are, and we're gonna throw some of this more hardcore stuff into it. So what you get is a band that is kind of more or less returned to their thrash roots. But the word roots is very important because there's a huge Sepultura influence that comes in on Reborn.
It definitely has a different vibe. It definitely sets the standard for what I'm expecting when I listen to Living Sacrifice. And I hear pieces of what you're going to hear a lot more of when the name Rocky Gray is introduced, not just into this band, but into this scene. So whatever the chemistry is that makes this album sound like this, it's a sound that is going to continue onward into the next century and in some ways is definitely still here. You mentioned all the bands that cite Living Sacrifice as an influence. This is the album they talk about. If it's not this, it's the Hammering Process, which we're going to get into shortly.
Yeah, I think for me, this is one where just straight out the gate, it's obvious this is a much better record. I think they obviously, from the sounds of what Dan was saying, maybe he was pressured into it, but this is one where they found a vocalist who, maybe unbeknownst to them, just fit what they were doing musically a lot better. I don't think I can understate how this album is just leaps and bounds better than anything they put out thus far. It's almost like instead of having parts of a song, they learned how to really write full songs for this record and paid attention to the flow of a record. You know, I think when people talk about how great this band is, I would have to assume this is the starting point for that conversation to be had. I think some other things that I noticed about this record for me were that this is also one of the first albums where those weird stuttery off-time rhythms that they were doing actually were locked in from a production standpoint and just didn't sound disjointed. It's something, you know, we kind of joked about this a little bit ago. With this band anyway, I feel like No Longer, I feel like, has the same cadence as Slipknot for Sick, but obviously, like, maybe Slipknot would have borrowed from this, like the cadence to it. I was like, I recognize that. That's almost the same vocal cadence from Sick.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't want to beat the dead horse that we kind of all have in the fact that we like this record. It's a step up from the last one, but when people talk about Living Sacrifice and all the things I've heard people say, to me, this is the first time where I'm like, okay, I can see it. I can hear it. I can understand why people, like, listening to this at times, I was like, oh, I see where Jesse from Killswitch got his vocal style.
Yeah.
Like, there's obvious influences that I can hear in stuff I listened to that came after this, and I understand why. Before this, I didn't really have that feeling. Like, I was just kind of like, why does everyone like this band?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is that, like, they were more, I don't know, like, if you look at lyrics for a minute, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about lyrics with Christian bands, but DJ's lyrics were very biblical. Like, there was always a lesson in each song, you know, that was trying to teach you something, trying to implore some sort of idea on you. But at the same time, when I'm reading through DJ's lyrics, I'm getting a lot of the biblical stuff, which I think was very important to him at the time, and it was his writing style. I mean, almost everything that DJ did rhymed, you know, and was, like, actually very, very well written, very well composed. Bruce's lyrics, on the other hand, are a little bit more straightforward. They're a little bit more in your face. They're still, the band still has the same message, but they're telling it a little bit differently. But they have moments of just awesome on it, where it's like stuff that you feel like a heavy, aggressive Christian band should have. Like, if you look at the song "Liar" at the very end, where it's like, they played a sample. I have seen the devil, and I have chained him. I cut him to pieces. Like, it's that sort of thing that really can get somebody that came from a religious background, like I did, like, really, really amped up. And then they play like what's essentially the heaviest song ever in Liar, that's just like straight blast, and then just ends it off with that clip of Lucifer is no more. And you're like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that Christian bands should do. Number one, to differentiate themselves from everybody else, and at the same time also like really establish what their message is and to keep it consistent with what it was in the past. They did all of that very, very masterfully on Reborn, because this absolutely could have been an opportunity for them to be like, you know what, we're gonna ease back on the religious elements and themes or whatever, but they decided to die on that hill. They were just like, yeah, we're gonna stick with this. This is what we're all about, and it's important that they did this on this record, because this is what made them such a pillar in the Christian heavy music scene. This was the band that bands aspired to be after Reborn. This record, and then you add this record coming out, and then you've got Zayo's Blood and Fire comes out right afterwards, and now it's not such a big mystery as to why every band that you heard in 2004 that was metalcore was a Christian band. All of that can be traced back to these two records.
$2,000, The Hammering Process.
How do you follow up Reborn?
You release The Hammering Process.
I mean, The Hammering Process is... You know how I said that Reborn had a very big Sepultura influence? It's right out on display on The Hammering Process, to the point where the band hired a separate percussionist in order to add even more to the kind of more tribal-style drumming that was going on in Reborn. Now you've got that. The band actually slows down on The Hammering Process, which some people seem to have had some issue with in the past, but those people are idiots. The pace of The Hammering Process is much slower. The riffs are heavier. The production is just astronomically better than anything that they've done before. And at this point, these guys are standing toe-to-toe with a lot of the bands that were popular in 2000, like your Slipknots and Mudvaynes. But the difference is that they were not really nu metal. There's a little bit in there. There's a little bit in there, which I think really just comes from the sound of metal that year. Everybody was still trying to sound or capture what Sepultura did on Roots. And I think that they really lean into that hard. Bruce's vocal delivery is much stronger, and this is the first record where the band actually starts incorporating way more melody into the actual songs. And I'm not talking about what they did in the past, where it's like, okay, this is the heavy part, now we stop, and we're going to play this melodic thing, and then we're going to go back into heavy again. This is actually like integrating melody into the actual songwriting. And first appearance of any sort of like actually sung vocals on a Living Sacrifice record.
Joe, do you want to go?
Go for it.
Okay. I've written a lot of notes about this record. I feel like the thing that's been impressive about this band is their ability to change within the current metal landscape, even at times being ahead of it. This is clearly a step into that nu metal realm, as Dan was talking about, with songs like Flatline, but they put a solo in it, and at the time that wasn't being done. And that's interesting when you're kind of seeing them following the current landscape, but still being true to themselves and doing things that weren't being done. Like at this point, solos weren't a thing, especially in nu metal.
They needed to be.
Right. And I mean, I agree, but I think the thing is too, and I know I said it on the other albums, but man, like this is a band that I think really hits their stride when they slow down and stay in that mid-tempo-y area. Altered Life, one of the first examples of them bringing melody into the vocals, as Dan kind of said. So that's now a new welcomed addition to the band's ever evolving sound as we're, a few records in. And I also still love that the band hasn't abandoned the things that made them them. Like, I'm saying solos, but like they didn't abandon them. When a lot of 80s bands were like, oh, the new thing is don't do solo, so fuck it, we're not going to. Or the bands that were coming out, this is a very weird example, but I know for a fact that this person had said this. But Dan Donegan from Disturbed was like, I was a shredder dude, like growing up when playing guitar. I always was into those people, but that wasn't what was cool in style. So I just hid that part of my playing. And, now there's solos on all the Disturbed fucking tracks because that's who he is as a player. And I think that's something that's really interesting about this band is they are able to progress who they are, still stay current with current bands, but they're able to still keep what made them them. And that's just such an interesting thing that I feel like a lot of bands of their era and of their caliber necessarily, they dumbed everything down just to be more mainstream. As Dan kind of touched on, the tinges of Latin percussions on songs like Flatline and Hand of the Dead, kind of usher in a different vibe. Altered Life also being another one where we get more melodic vocals. So we're just kind of seeing this band 9 years in and 4 albums in, still able to be relevant, if not innovators, where a lot of their contemporaries of, we'll just say 80s thrash, didn't fucking do that. And I think that should be A, commended, and B, I think really adds to why they were able to stay relevant for as up until this point and beyond, because they were willing to see that what they were doing might be dated, but they figured out a way to bring it into current times and not make it feel dated.
I really don't know when the commercial side of metal made the decision that solos were a bad thing. Generally, it appeared during the nu metal time. Generally, it began around nu metal, but there was still... But people that knew how to play solos were still present. My favorite example is Kirk Hammett's comments on the Some Kind of Monster documentary. If you take the solos out, it dates it to this period. There was no reason why you should stop playing a solo as long as it fits with the song. But that was a decision that a lot of people made. It makes sense to me why Korn doesn't have a fucking shred solo. It also makes sense to me that many people were tired of the 80s style, we have to have a guitar solo after the second verse and shortly after the first bridge. It also makes sense that Living Sacrifice, who are innovators in this genre, who are present with other bands that would go on to define the genre to many people. By the way, 2003, Dan called, he said, listen to Zayo. You're following the influences into that Sepultura sound that everybody knows and loves with Roots, because it was all about bringing the heavy, not necessarily tuning it down and making it discordant. It was still groovy. It was about the rhythm more than the song itself. So everybody cites Living Sacrifice for their influence. And they still have the fucking balls to put a solo on an album in 2000?
I mean, all over that album. And I think that, I think it's interesting how much better their songwriting actually has become over the years. I mean, Reborn was rock solid. Hammering Process, it's a whole new level. Not referencing Pantera, just by the way. But it's totally better. Like it's the sequencing on Hammering Process and the overall musicianship, the restraint that is actually shown on certain songs, because I know these guys could just like shred our heads off in a moment's notice, but they don't do that as much. They do stick to a little bit more of a mainstream songwriting kind of perspective, like you look at like the song Altered Life, it's very Living Sacrifice, but it is very verse, chorus, verse. And a lot of the times that's where I put on my critical hat and I go, oh, come on now, guys. Let's not resort to that. But I think in this case it helps them. This is the most listenable Living Sacrifice album if you were a new listener. Because all the tracks flow. The album has a whole lot more dynamics. I love Reborn, but Reborn is just, it's not super dynamic. Not like this. And so in looking at the Hammering Process as a record, it is actually one of the few records that I will throw out there and say is a perfect record. Because every song on it is enjoyable. There's no stinkers. There's no skips. And they deliver everything that they promised on the first track on every track.
"2002, Conceived in Fire."
Conceived in Fire is one of my favorite Living Sacrifice albums. They very much continue on in the same vein that they did in the Hammering Process. There's nothing too weird, but you do start seeing them pulling some of their older influences out. There's a little bit more death metal on this record, a little bit more thrash, a little bit more, even a little bit of like black metal stuff with some of the vocals is thrown in there. They want to be remembered as this metal band. And so they always want to kind of stick to that aesthetic. And I think this record is probably the least amount of change between two records because you released a Hammering Process. So now you have to continually deliver something that is up to that level. And I do think that Conceived in Fire, it succeeds in that. I think that it is not quite as good as the Hammering Process, but that's just because they couldn't use Hammering Process songs on Conceived in Fire, right? So you had to write a new album. But this, they actually double down on some of the catchiness of some of the vocal lines. They actually back up a little bit on some of the melodic singing. There's like one melodic vocal, and it's just a line. It's not a repeated chorus or anything. And that's just it. To quote Joe, it's the next album by Living Sacrifice. But one thing that I think is very notable about Conceived in Fire, Bruce's vocals are so much more intense than they've ever been. To me, this is the peak of his vocal ability.
Absolutely.
He's deeper. He has a lot more variation. Like, you go back and listen to Reborn, he just screams. Like that's it. It's just one monotone scream throughout the entire record. And I love it. I think it sounds great. Hammering Process, he gets a little bit more diverse, brings in, some of the other guys in the band kind of step up to the mic and do, kind of their more clean vocals. But Conceived in Fire is a Bruce record. It is Bruce from beginning to end. And he's deeper. He just sounds like a beast, man. He's like super deep, sounds insanely pissed off. And I don't know, it just works really, really well. And I think my favorite song on Conceived in Fire is the song Ignite, which is almost it doubles down on the percussive elements of the band in such a way that they almost start reaching like a Meshuggah level of technicality with rhythm. And I mean that's the first time that like I've ever been like, whoa, like this is them doing something that is actually like super innovative and something that other people are going to latch onto and try to replicate. I mean, they definitely did that in Reborn. Like I don't want to take away from what Reborn did, but this was the first time where I felt like the band was like moving forward. They weren't just sitting there being okay with the success of Reborn and the Hammering Process. They were actually doing something really cool, and just that whole song is just incredible, right down to the piercing solo that comes in like at the end of it, because like Meshuggah wasn't like, you wouldn't hear a solo like that on a Meshuggah song. So it comes across sounding like Meshuggah, but also like very Living Sacrifice.
I think the thing that's interesting about this record is, a song like Symbiotic just really brings back some of the older thrash elements of the side of the band, especially, with that solo in it. I'm still just kind of really blown away by the extra percussion, which seems to, at this point now, be on full display. Even as early as like the first couple of tracks, and almost adds, like Dan said on the last record, a little bit of that Sepultura Soulfly kind of vibe meets Slipknot at times, because I feel like I hear like a keg or something, like not a straight Latin percussion, but something a little bit more, I guess, straight ahead. This might be honestly just one of the few bands, like I said, that tries something on a previous record and then really just finds a way to integrate it more into what they're doing on the next release. And it's just really refreshing, especially in a genre and scene that's evolving at this point, on Conceived in Fire, in this era of metalcore and so forth. That really you're just not used to seeing or hearing. And I can't understate that enough. A lot of times where we as fans are like, we're so fickle, where if you don't do anything, all we go is, oh, fuck, you're not changing. But then if you do too much, wow, fuck, you're doing too much. And there doesn't seem to be that middle ground that we as fans will appreciate, where we're like, okay, you grew enough, but you didn't venture too far out of what I want you to do. And this is a band that I feel has done a very good job of straddling that very thin line that we as fans often put bands into, while not making it feel like a contrived effort either. And that's, like I said, it's something I'm going to keep talking on and as a talking point. But it's just really interesting to see a band that started off as an 80s kind of thrash band be able to progress and stay current with the current metal, quote unquote metal scene, and it not feel forced or fake. And we can name so many bands in this era of this time that tried doing that shit, and it just does not fucking work.
And what they do on this record is that Sepultura influenced sound taken where it needed to go logically next. You're still rhythmic. You're still pushing the boundaries when it comes to independent metal bands who are Christian in nature. This could easily be one of the heaviest records for anyone in 2002, but not everybody was listening to it. That's unfortunate, because now everyone does listen to it, because we've passed that point, at least most people have, where I can't listen to that if it's a Christian band, or I won't listen to it if it's not a Christian band. I think 2020, we can just listen to the record for what it is. The only thing that would make this sound different, if this band were mainstream in 2002, it would have had a different sound of producer's polish on it. It sounds to me like what every independent metal record sounded like in 2002, and that was far above and beyond what other records sounded like at that time.
So I had no idea that Andy Sneap actually produced this record. I found that out like literally the other day when I was ripping the CD. And
Surprise!
I was just kind of looking in the liner notes. That was a huge surprise. But yeah, like, and this is a really interesting part of Living Sacrifice's history, in that they were one of the biggest Christian metalcore bands to exist in 2002. They were like the go-to band, except for like Zao, but like Zao was having problems at that time, and so like there wasn't the unified scene that there is now. And so I think what's fascinating about this era is that they still can't quite get popular to make it. They're going to shows, and these kids are walking up to them and they're like, "Dude, your new record stands toe to toe with like Soulfly and Slipknot and like all these bands. Like, you guys are every bit as good as those bands." And so I don't understand why you're not on bigger tours or whatever. And it's like, well, they're on Solid State and they're still playing Christian shows, and they're still, because that's the scene that's there to support them. But like, how many churchgoers are really going to go see a metal show that's that brutal. It's such a fine line to walk, and it's such a shame too, because they actually did end up breaking up during this period, and they were just gone for a number of years because 2002 it just wasn't quite enough. But the heartbreaking thing is that, like, if they had just held on a little bit longer, that scene literally, like, Living Sacrifice breaks up, and then As I Lay Dying puts out a record called Frail Words Collapse. And suddenly Christian metalcore is like mainstream, at least in the vein of like heavier music. If they had held on long enough, I remember reading social media posts from As I Lay Dying. They were super stoked to play their new Frail Words Collapse songs in front of Living Sacrifice fans. Like, that's literally what they said. Like we can't wait for the Living Sacrifice fans to hear what we've got going on over here. And that's just completely mind blowing for me. That if they had just held on long enough, they might have been remembered like an As I Lay Dying.
Because that's the dream.
Yeah.
Even if your scene isn't the mainstream, if you hold on just long enough, eventually everyone's going to catch on and everyone's going to get it.
Yeah. But they'd had enough, man. They'd been in the game since 1990. They'd been doing this thing that they're doing since 1990. So when you've put out this many great records in a row and you're still not really getting the recognition, and I don't think it was like about the recognition for the band or the money, but like, if you're putting this much time and effort in it and doing it at this professional of a level, but you're still self-funding a lot of that, I don't blame them at all. It's just that now I've got the hindsight to be like, oh man, if you guys could have grinded it out until like 2003, 2004, you guys probably would have gotten on a bigger label. You probably would have gotten, a lot more press, and it would have been awesome for you. But they didn't, and they decided to break up, and that's when bands like Demon Hunter started coming out, and bands like As I Lay Dying and Under Oath got more popular, and then suddenly you had like this whole brand new, like a second wave of Christian metalcore, which ultimately ended up going on to tons and tons of success. And that was kind of it for Living Sacrifice for a long time. They put out a record called In Memoriam, which was just like their final release, which actually, the interesting thing about In Memoriam is that there is 3 brand new songs. And I don't know if they were leftovers, but they're actually like really good Living Sacrifice songs. They sound very similar to like a Hammering Process, Conceived in Fire type of sound. And Buddy and I used to actually do a radio show, and we played those songs all the time in the regular rotation. And yeah, it was good. It had those 3 songs. And one of my favorite songs off In Memoriam is the re-record of Enthroned from Non-Existent. They re-recorded a Non-Existent track with the modern lineup. And oh my God, like if they had re-recorded the entire Non-Existent album with that lineup, I mean, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd be like, yep, Non-Existent, the re-record, best album ever made. Like hands down. Bruce just brings something to that track, and the ferocity of the band with all their modern influences, bringing it to bear on that old song. Enthroned 98 is incredible. And that song actually, I think, was on a Solid State compilation several years before, so they threw it in as kind of an extra. But, I mean, and that was pretty much it. That was crickets. Just straight crickets.
2010, The Infinite Order.
So the bros in Demon Hunter had spent many, many years trying to essentially fill that void. Like, there were bands that came out in the Christian scene in those in-between years that kind of were, I mean, and maybe this is just imagined as a fan, but it almost seemed like they were trying to fill that void that Living Sacrifice left, because Christian metal was always missing that that legit metal band that had legit metal influences, from the secular scene that would play solos in the 2010s or, play solos in 2005, 2006. And people got burned out eventually on the As Lay Dying, Gothenburg, death metal type sound. So everybody wanted that, like, American metal band, Christian. Everybody wanted Living Sacrifice is what they wanted. So you got bands that kind of tried to fill that void. You had Demon Hunter, but Demon Hunter just leaned so heavily into the mainstream rock and new metal territory that people that were big fans of Living Sacrifice's heavier stuff were like, nah, that's not really for me. And then you had bands like The Showdown, which, definitely sounded different from Living Sacrifice, but had kind of that same vibe, And then you had Becoming the Archetype was probably the closest you could get. But eventually, I think that enough people convinced the guys in Living Sacrifice that, like, if you guys came back now, like, you would do better. You would do better. And, you don't have to come back full time. We live in a world now where you guys don't have to tour full time. I mean, Demon Hunter still doesn't tour full time. They literally are a band that works their jobs. And they'll do, like, a tour in the summer, and that's it. And so eventually Living Sacrifice, they reignited the fire and they released a 2-song like EP called Death Machine, which had 2 songs, Death Machine and The Battle. And I remember being super, super stoked for those songs. And then they're like, okay, now that we've made a little bit of, like, iTunes sales, on this, we'll go ahead and record a new record. And what we got was The Infinite Order.
Generally, the sound of Living Sacrifice from 2000 to present day is credited to Rocky Gray's influence. I don't know if that is 100% true or if Rocky Gray's style just generally leans in that direction we've been discussing. But a lot of what you hear on these newer records, The Infinite Order, and going back to Conceived in Fire, you've heard similar sounding riffs in Soul Embraced for years.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care whose fault it is, but I remember how much hype there was in 2010 when this album was about to come out. All I heard was, you remember when Living Sacrifice broke up a few years ago? Well, they're coming back. And everyone was excited. Everybody was talking about the band again. They were one of the bands that influenced everybody, and they left just too early. So imagine how excited we were to hear that Living Sacrifice is coming back, and they have new music, and they're a band again.
They're a
2010
band
was a
you can
great
go
year.
see again, Hasn't been that way, obviously recently, but, like, they were a band that you could catch on a show and you could catch on a tour. And The Infinite Order is an interesting record because I would say it's probably the safest Living Sacrifice record that they could have put out. And don't get me wrong, I'm criticizing it for being safe, but it's super smart. Super smart to oh, hey, guys, we're back. You remember those records you loved, Hammering Process and Conceived in Fire? This record's kind of like those, except not so much on the additional percussion. We don't really have that going on in the sound anymore. This record, while still capitalizing on the metalcore sort of sound that they had established on the last 2 records, they kind of take that and they put it into a format where they're playing songs that you would expect Living Sacrifice to play. I mean, I don't know. This is a hard one for me because as much as I like the record, I think it's a really great standalone record to listen to. If you listen to it and you like Living Sacrifice, you're not going to have a bad time. But I do think that The Infinite Order doesn't necessarily have as compelling of material on it as we'd had on the previous 2 records. And that's so hard because it's so many years later. and obviously they just kind of had to get the chops going again. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think the record sounds good. I think Bruce sounds good. I think they actually still do sound like a young band, which is admirable considering how long they've been a band. But yeah, I think they do some interesting things on this record. The last two tracks being like kind of a slower paced, like kind of dirgier songs, like focusing more on that like slow, heavy sound. And they pull a lot of their thrash from the past into some of these song structures. Rules of Engagement, I think, is probably my favorite song on the record. Nietzsche's Madness is good. Like I said, it's not that this record doesn't have bangers on it. It does. But for whatever reason, it just didn't hit me the same way Conceived in Fire did, which could also just go back to that age-old, I'm sorry, we can't make you feel the way you felt in 2003.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is, like, how I said previously how this band has done a really good job of blending its whole catalog up to this point. I feel like this was them trying to go more back to the thrash roots that, they kind of came from, and maybe a lot of older fans were wanting. I don't know if fans wanted that, but still adding what was becoming now modern metalcore. At this point it's 2010, so metalcore, Christian metalcore especially, is huge. Obviously they're on one of the bigger labels of that style, basically in Solid State. I kept asking myself this question when listening to this record, especially given the fact that they were basically on a quote-unquote 8-year hiatus or whatever.
Yeah.
I still don't know if these guys are innovating a sound and or style, or just doing a very great job of integrating what's popular within that sound while still somehow not making it feel contrived.
I think the lack of contrived is an indicator that it's them. It's not, this is popular, let's do this. I think that they have a specific way of putting things together that is unique to this band. I can't think of another band that does not have Rocky Gray in it that can put together this style of metal or metalcore. Everybody else was trying to throw in extra guitars and 3 different parts and have more orchestrations than the band is physically capable of pulling off live. Living Sacrifices just were heavy.
And melodic, though. I mean, Infinite Order has some of the most melodic material they've ever put out. But like John said, it's not done in a contrived way. At no point during Infinite Order does everything fade out and you just hear a hey! Like, it just doesn't do that. And even whenever they did do that on the hammering process, it still wasn't that. For whatever reason, it still blended in such a way that it was okay. Like, it just brush over you. If you're not into clean vocals, it's fine because they're not shoving them down your throat. And so metal fans are going to be totally fine with that. I do think that the Infinite Order could benefit from being a little bit more fast-paced, a little bit more immediate than it is. But, I mean, the second half of the record really kind of slows down. The top half is much more engaging, no pun intended. But, Infinite Order, it was a fine release for Living Sacrifice. I'd rather have it than not have it, I guess, if that's the way you want to look at it. But, it was a very safe record for them. It was good. It was, it got them kind of back in the good graces, I guess, of the Christian music scene. But then, again, they weren't really doing it full time, so it was a little while before we got another record.
2013, Ghost Thief.
I'm going to go ahead and just say probably the unpopular opinion on this. This just, to me, sounds like a rather straightforward, I'll say it, uninspired, especially given, the Infinite Order and Conceived in Fire. This just to me feels like a very safe kind of paint by numbers living sacrifice record. It's not great, it's not terrible. It just kind of is. And given what we got on the Infinite Order, I feel like it was a pretty big letdown for me.
Yeah, I mean that is how I initially did feel about it, and I felt that way actually up until this week. Whenever we went back and listened to everything again, I found a lot more about Ghost Thief, but I can't argue with that. It is kind of paint by numbers, and for whatever reason, it actually sounds a lot thinner. Like the sound doesn't sound as full on Ghost Thief as it did even on the Infinite Order, and definitely not like the same level as Hammering Process or Conceived in Fire. I think the songs are still good, but it's almost like somebody just came to a band meeting and was like, well, we've got 10 songs or we've got 12 songs or whatever, like, so let's go ahead and do the thing that we do and we'll record them and put them out. I don't think Ghost Thief is bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think they are beyond at this point putting out a bad record. They don't have they're never going to put out like another something like Non-Existent or something that you're just it's going to be so far from what you're expecting. But I also think that is safe, and that if this is providing any sort of supplemental income for the band, it is good to put out a record that the fans are going to like. And there are some good songs on Ghost Thief. It's just that like this could also be the result of me just getting older, and when I listen to Living Sacrifice, there's specific songs that I want to hear, and an album of new material may not necessarily ever be able to quench that. Like, I want to believe that like they could put out something, it could be mind blowing, and I would immediately love it, but I don't know if I would, So if Ghost Thief is more expertly composed than anything else that they've ever done, my nostalgia for the band and their classic records, would still make me be like, oh yeah, I mean, it's all right. I don't know. This could be a me thing. I've been trying to figure out for years why I don't like Ghost Thief as much as I feel like I should. And I think it just boils down to the fact that like it's just not, like John said, it's not necessarily as inspired. It's just kind of like, yeah, we have these songs. We hope you guys like them. And maybe it doesn't actually need to be more than that. Maybe it's just totally fine. But I'm still gonna buy whatever the next Living Sacrifice release is. I'm still gonna go see the band anytime I'm able to go see them. So I mean, in that regard, I think they've succeeded overall as a band. Even if you put a record on that I'm not super stoked on, you didn't put a bad record out that pissed me off. So I mean, they're this many years in now, almost 30 years, more than 30 years. And they're still doing pretty well, which is more than I can say for a lot of bands their age.
John's got something brewing in his head.
No, I mean, the thing that's interesting, just as a whole, like I said, you guys are kind of challenging me with some of the bands that we're going to be talking about this year. I actually was pulling up the master list just to kind of take a look at how many bands I don't fucking know, and I've never really, outside of maybe a song or two, have ever listened to. And it's one of those things where, when I realized I had 2 weeks, really only for me about a week, because I went to Vegas for about 5 days for my anniversary. So I basically crammed living this discography, as well as what we're talking about next week, into about a week. And it was really interesting to just see the parallels between the two, even though they couldn't have been a more stark contrast as far as two different bands going. But that's kind of the interesting thing about some of this sometimes when doing these is you're like, oh, there's actually a lot more similarities between bands that are polar opposites of each other than you think. And sometimes it takes doing something like this to kind of realize that. And I'm kind of glad, because now at least, Living Sacrifice is one of those bands for a lot of the bands that I like, like I said earlier, I could hear where Jesse's vocal style came from Killswitch Engage. On the band we're talking about next week, I can hear the influences that they've had on hardcore bands that I listen to, and even some punk bands and so forth. So it's just kind of interesting to go back and knowing that I've never listened to these things, but I'm able to listen to it with the 2020 years basically, and knowing the bands and people that have cited these people as influences for a very long time, and finally hearing those influences shining through. And it may not necessarily be something that I'm going to go back and listen to all the time, but at least I have the appreciation and understanding now. And I think that's something that this show has always kind of strived to do, is maybe be the conduit for, you may like XYZ mainstream band, or, quote unquote mainstream. We'll say like a band like Killswitch is mainstream to us. But you wouldn't maybe have them without a Living Sacrifice. You wouldn't have them without, a Shadows Fall, without Aftershock, without, a lot of these bands that sometimes Dan and Joe and Jeff and whomever else before have talked about. So I'm interested and excited to kind of be a part of this and kind of learn more a little bit about some of my history with some of these bands, and how they've influenced bands that I really enjoy, while also maybe being the voice for the fans that listen to this show and go, I've never listened to this band, but now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. And I hope that's what people get out of it, for sure.
I don't think Living Sacrifice in 2013 needs to write the next big metalcore record. I think Ghost Thief is another album of songs. They've already written your favorite album, and they're going to play the songs live. Is this a letdown? I don't think so. I think it's just the band having gone away, having done enough, at least in their eyes, that they're just doing what they want. And at the end of the day, you can still go see the band play the songs from the hammering process live. So, yeah, it's a little par for the course, but it's not the worst album I've heard. And it's definitely not the worst album in their discography.
No.
No, there's one that stands out to me. Yeah.
Holy shit, yeah. And I wish it was non-existent.
Oh, no.
Final thoughts on Living Sacrifice. Dan.
I mean, what else is there to say? Living Sacrifice is a classic band that you should be listening to. If the Christian thing bothers you, I'm sorry. But, I mean, that just is what the band is. And they are one of the best metal bands that you're going to hear that has had this long of a career that you've not heard of, probably. But if you have and you're in the know, then there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to be able to add to what your appreciation is for this band. They mean a lot to me. I still listen to them very regularly. And if you haven't checked out Living Sacrifice, I mean, seriously, like, they're the band that they're the band that you've never heard that is going to make you appreciate innovation that you didn't even know was there. It's like what John says, like, a lot of your favorite bands that you listen to have probably been influenced by Living Sacrifice to some degree.
John, what about you?
I mean, I think I kind of indirectly already said it before we were officially doing the final thoughts. So I feel like anything else I would say or add on to what Dan just said would kind of be beating the dead horse. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
I think Living Sacrifice is one of the most influential bands in the metalcore scene. Whether or not your band started as a Christian band, is still a Christian band, or decided that they were going to no longer be a Christian band because you ran out of ways to say the same thing and write new riffs with it, Living Sacrifice is still the band that got you where you are today. They put it all together. They gave you the formula, and the formula really is just Sepultura. And isn't that already the new metal formula? So how did we go from that to metalcore? It's interesting. I like listening to the band. I like listening to the early albums because they remind me that the members of this band are not only influenced by that solid metalcore sound, but there was a time where all they wanted to do was just be Slayer.
Yeah. We've all been there.
So how you're not listening to Living Sacrifice in 2020, how you're not listening to Living Sacrifice in 2021, I don't know. But you have definitely heard Living Sacrifice in your favorite band. So you need to be listening to Living Sacrifice. John, what's your album of the week?
It's going to be Golden Age of Grotesque by Marilyn Manson.
Good call.
Write that down, home stenographer.
That's what I do, man.
I'm going to go home. I'm going to go masturbate now. Why don't you write that down, home stenographer?
Let's write her down.
It's one of my favorite obscure Chappelle skits.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I just got this record recently, local pickup by The Burial. It's called Lights and Perfections, and I've really been digging it. Face Down Records band that I probably should have been paying more attention to, but just didn't up until now. So, yeah, I'm all about The Burial this week.
What about after it?
No, we did that already.
Oh.
For me, it's March or Die by Motorhead.
R.I.P.
See you in the future, Lemmy.
One of these days we'll do a Motorhead episode. Maybe.
I might have to override the schedule and just put it on there myself.
I can't
Oh, no,
imagine,
nobody
Dan,
overrides
that you,
the schedule.
you would like that, given the fact that what you thought about some of the stuff with the band we were talking about next.
Oh, yeah.
Take us out, DFT.
Hurdy, her.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. If you've ever been listening to our podcast and you would like to recommend us a band to talk about on the show, we are very open to that. You can send us messages or get a hold of us in any way that you see fit. But here's a couple of ways to get you started. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can follow us on Instagram at discussmetal. You can go to our sweet Teespring store that has all kinds of Discography Discussion merch on it. There'll be a link in our show notes that'll take you right there. Also in our show notes will be a link to our Discord server, which is a live chat service where you can hang out with us, talk to some other listeners of the show, and just enjoy yourself. There's an awesome pool. You should check out the pool. If you like watching the episodes live or you just like to hear my voice while I play some video games, you can find us on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/discussmetaldan or twitch.discussmetal.com. For all of your live streaming needs. We also do Brutally Speaking over there, John and I. So definitely check that out. And guys, this has been a great fun live stream. I love being able to let people in on how we don't take ourselves nearly as seriously as maybe we seem like we do on the edited shows.
And on that note, this has been episode 204 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
I've
Give me a whiskey.
got these 50 cents here. Can we use them for anything?
You can put it toward my whiskey fund.
Let's do it.
How much for that whiskey?
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.
Yeah, all these guys showing off their whiskeys.
No,
Gotta
you
love
you
it.
guys have seen that SNL Drinking Crow skit, right?
I don't think I have actually.
How much for that whiskey? That whiskey there? That's $1.
John, what's coming up on Brutally Speaking in the next 2 weeks?
Well, it really depends on what Dan. Well, actually, no. There's only so much Dan can listen to.
I'm like 2.5. I'm 7 hours into a 3-hour Shannon Larkin conversation, so we've got that going.
Hey, you know
on.
what? The polls spoke. They wanted the whole thing, not it broken in pieces. So
Absolutely, they wanted the whole thing. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, 2-part episodes are no fun. I appreciate anybody
I was
that
gonna make
grinds
it
it
into
out with us. What's that?
I was gonna put it into thirds.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't do that.
No, you know.
Here's hour 1 of my conversation with Shannon Larkin.
Yeah. So yeah, we have Shannon Larkin from Godsmack. We definitely get to talk about some worship and tribute for about 45 minutes, which is a lot of fucking fun.
Oh yeah.
There's some fun little bullshit Godsmack stuff right in the beginning that I decided to keep in because I think it's funny. About how much of a prima donna Sully is.
Well, I mean, you got it right.
We're putting out tomorrow, as of when we're recording this, we're putting out our episode with Max and Anastasia of The Haunt. And Dan will probably listen to my part 2 with Ray Hawthorne of North Kingsley, which is Shabo from System of a Down's new band.
Yeah, they need to put out more music.
They put out a second one.
I know, but they need to put out more.
I know it's coming.
Way too small chunks for my tastes.
As of right now, just because I feel like shooting myself in the foot for things that are not going to pan out.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, we are possibly going to talk to Sean Lopez of Crosses and Far.
That sounds like fun.
Working on probably talking to Chad Nicefield of Wilson. They just put out their live recording, and that'll probably be a very irresponsible conversation.
I can I can feel that.
And what else am I working on? Probably going to talk to DL from Execacia Strain.
Nice.
We've been waiting for the new year to happen. Probably going to talk to Chad from Legend.
Too many Chads on this podcast.
I know. And if this motherfucker would maybe be into it, maybe it might be time.
Gonna get my medal.
Might be time to get a Mr. Corey Brandon back on.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a lot of fun. I'll just spam him.
So basically, a lot of things in the works, but unfortunately, given what Brutally Speaking is doing, we kind of are at the mercy of the industry kind of coming to a close from about Thanksgiving to nowish. As of when I'm recording. So
there could be a flood of new stuff to check out.
There probably will be a flood of stuff, and it'll probably be one of those where it seems like we don't have a whole lot, and then we just get bombarded with a bunch of shit. Want to shout out everyone who checked out that Tatiana from Ginger episode. That was a lot of fun. That's been crushing on YouTube, which has been great. I think we're approaching probably 1,500 views on that thing. So
something like that, yeah.
In about a week, which is awesome. So a lot of cool shit. And yeah, it's kind of the fun thing about Brutally Speaking. That podcast as a whole right now is a lot is up in the air because of just New Year. Yep. So looking to do some cool stuff. And yeah, I'm excited to join this team. And there's some episodes coming up that are, I think, going to be a lot of fun, and some for the rest of the year that I'm looking forward to talking about. Hint, we already mentioned one of the bands during this episode. So I'm excited to talk about it. And I might, the fun thing about me joining this is maybe I can get some of the friends that I've made from Brutally Speaking to come join us for this over here and talk about some fun artists that they are a fan of. So
always welcome.
A lot of big things coming, I think, this year. And I think this episode and the next one you guys will hear next week will be a lot of fun. So leave us comments. Keep the conversation going on Discord, like they said. Comment on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you happen to prefer to leave comments. I know that's something we all are going to work on exponentially, is trying to engage with the people who listen to this show. I think something that I'm excited to bring to this is my lack of knowledge on a lot of shit. So I'm excited for people to challenge my opinions as much as they do Dan and Joe's, or Jeff's, or Buddy's, or whomever else was on this show in this position. And I think that's the fun thing about this show, is that at the end of the day, we're not taking it necessarily too seriously, because the whole point of it is that we are music fans and want to keep learning about awesome new music. So that's the fun part about this show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, we did it. We did 2 hours live on Living Sacrifice, and yeah, can't wait for people to hear this on the audio side of it. But yeah, if anybody has any questions in the chat, let us know, and I can still see the chat even after we've signed off. So yeah, definitely reach out. Definitely keep supporting us, guys. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.